Hello, everyone. So, as we know, and we can see it every day of the week, we turn on the news, we turn on social media, and unfortunately, everything we nearly see is negative, and it's a sad thing to say. And usually, I'm usually negative too because we have to talk about these things. Unfortunately, you can't just ignore it. Unfortunately, a lot of the negativity, which is upsetting. You can't ignore it because if we ignore it, it doesn't solve the problem. By addressing it, at least you can acknowledge the problem and try and find a solution. But unfortunately, in the modern world now, uh, things have just gone through the window. Let's put it that way. Everything's gone through the window. We see in Iraq, Iran, the war in Iran, and we see the trouble there in the Middle East, in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, etc., bombing happening. Innocent people being killed. We've seen in Iran too, innocent people being killed across the board. And we see even in Ukraine and Russia people being killed. In Sudan, we see it in Afghanistan too. Women being subjected to insane oppression by the Taliban, and even in Iran to insane oppression. We see in China and other places oppression of people for their basic rights, even speaking their mind, even in Russia or even in the UK. It's an insane thing to say, but even in the UK, yeah, you can be arrested. And in other parts of Europe too, you can be arrested for your speech just for saying something, which would have been insane to say 20 years ago that you would have been arrested for something you said. But the world is becoming a lot more dangerous, and unfortunately, and I see this in a lot of young people, are very afraid. And unfortunately, the drum beats of war do rage a good bit across this planet, across this world. Um, and of course, we see this, as I say, but even just in Europe, Russia and Ukraine. And we see it in the Middle East too, with the war happening there, and of course in Sudan and other places around the world where there's conflict. And it all is senseless. It really, really is all senseless. When you boil it all down, it's all senseless because at the end of the day, the only people who benefit from this are the people at the top. It's not the only person. There's no honour and glory in war anymore. It's just for the young to die. Basically. That's what war is nowadays for rich people at the top. That's what it is for the 1%. There's no benefit for anybody else in society. People struggle to pay the bills. People struggle to make ends meet in peacetime and not wartime. But it is a frightening thing to see, and particularly the weaponization of food nowadays, particularly we see in Gaza and stuff, we've seen at that time. It's frightening to see that it can be weaponized and that it can be used as a weapon. And even we see with the Straits of Hormuz, energy and oil, etc., has been used as a weapon to target countries to submit to their will. And of course, it raises the questions of why we never planned for this in the past, why we never did, and why we're not self-sufficient enough. Because we have our own resources, we should be able to use them for times like this. But unfortunately, that's common sense, and that doesn't work in Ireland and in the world. But we see just the hopelessness in the world. We see conflict. We see killings. We see just. I think people come very desensitized to a lot of this because we see insane amount of violence, and just today seeing violence and violence and violence on social media. It's hard to watch. It's hard to comprehend the sheer amount of anger in the world, the sheer amount of hopelessness, I would say, and the sheer amount of just terror in the world being committed. And all of this is basically for nothing because at the end of the day, it achieves nothing. It really, really doesn't. It achieves nothing in any way, shape, or form. But it's a very upsetting world to live in. And I do think we're on the cusp of a very big conflict, unfortunately, at some point in the foreseeable future, in the next 30 years. It's inevitable that the Western countries of NATO, either be Russia or China, will probably go to war at some point. It's inevitable. It's just when it will happen. That's when it's the thing is. Unfortunately, it's dread by might and power nowadays. It's not by diplomacy. It's not by talking. It's just by action nowadays. Unfortunately, that's what's turned into. That nobody wants to admit defeat. Nobody wants to seek peace because it's easy to seek. It's easy to make war without peace. Basically, we see this in Ukraine. It's easier to wage war than look for peace, and that's the sad reality. And when you see that, it's a very frightening situation. That's across the board, because it's so easy to wage war, and because the big people at the top make money, and they don't care as long as they're making money. But it's so hard to make peace, to come to compromises, to get to a table, to discuss what you do to achieve peace, to get to the peace. And to keep the peace above all else, and it's very, very difficult to do that. That's the one thing that's difficult in the war, is to sit down and try and work out a deal somehow. And I think that's really frightening when you see that. that nowadays that it's all power and strength. It's not about diplomacy. It's not about sitting down and discussing these things. Because at the end of the day, you could fight and shoot and blow things every way up, but at the end of the day, eventually you have to sit down and say, look, we need terms of conditions. We need solutions. We need an end to the conflict. And it's unfortunate that day is unfortunately going, because nobody's willing to do that nowadays. Nobody's willing to talk about these things. Nobody's willing to sit down, and it's frightening to see. And as I say, just even just taking into, for example, the amount of people dying of poverty in Africa and other places. There's so many children too starving as we speak now. Unfortunately, there's thousands, well, hundreds of children probably starving to death. And it's a sad thing to take that in 2026, that people are starving to death, that innocent children that are done nothing to anybody are suffering, and it doesn't make any sense, because we see the money for war, the money for military industrial complexes. It's insane, and India could feed the world, to be totally honest. The sheer amount that's spent on militaries and the sheer amount that's spent on politicians and NGOs, etc., for their back pockets. It could feed the world, and it's an upsetting thing to see. Because we do live in a very frightening world, and we do live in a world that is unpredictable, that anything can happen. And unfortunately, it's not getting. Unfortunately, years ago, people would have said it'd been even when the Soviet Union fell, a lot of people would have said it'd been a better world. The things would be better. People would have a life. People would be able to achieve better things than before. And unfortunately, that always turned out to be misjudged, mislied, if you want to say it, mislied. But it's an unfortunate thing to really say, and I think it's a sad thing to say that in 2026 to win the state. But my main message, I suppose, here, and I just wanted to talk about, because it is important to talk about, even though I talk a lot about Ireland, etc., but it is important as Irish people, just even speak on behalf of Irish people here for a second. It's important that wherever we are in the world as Irish people, we should always try and find solutions to help conflicts, to try and resolve conflicts, to try and find peace, try and find a way out of conflicts, and try to find a peaceful way. Even though it might be the hard way of trying to find peace, and it might take long, difficult days, but the best thing and the most precious thing for every Irish citizen is freedom and it's peace. We thankfully have, and just the last point I make, the Good Friday Agreement is 38 years old, this coming up soon. And it's a credit to the people of Ireland and the people of Northern Ireland too, that we were able to achieve that peace, that violence, that bombings and killings on both sides, in the Republic and in Northern Ireland, for the last 38 years have gone down dramatically, and there's no violence as much as we've seen years ago. And it's a testament to the people who drove that peace, that sat down and talked about these issues and found a solution. And I think that's something that we probably couldn't achieve nowadays, but we can always hope to achieve. And when we have the hope to achieve something, we can achieve it. It's just the will to find it, and it's the will to make peace. Thank you.